So I'm filming this video January 29th, and I've been sitting with something that I unpacked yesterday, January 28th, 2021. Can't believe we're in 2021 anyway. And this was a trauma that I unpacked within myself. So I was listening to an audiobook called The Heart of Trauma. And I tend to listen to audiobooks or podcasts or whatever it is when I'm training and moving my body. And I was listening to this certain section on eating and trauma. The ENS, the enteric nervous system, the digestive system, the esophagus, what happens when we go into fight or flight or when we activate a sympathetic nervous system. And this combination of understanding the relationship with food, trauma, fear, what's happening in the body physiologically and also psychologically, and how the whole organism is interacting with its environment to attempt to keep itself safe. And I made a massive connection. And then I want to share something with you that this has been a really big thing for me for many years. So as a kid, I had colic. And I've had esophagus issues all of my life. I have done an MRI on this many years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago. I've got a narrow esophagus, and if I eat too fast or if I eat certain types of foods like potatoes or bread or even too much food in my mouth, certain substances, it activates this response in my esophagus where it tightens up and I cannot swallow. It's really quite intense actually. I cannot swallow and I have to regurgitate the food back up. And sometimes I can't even swallow water. Generally what I do is I do my best to eat slow and be very selective with the foods that I eat. And don't get me wrong, it's not a big thing. And again, a little bit of water, literally that much water, and I flush it down and I can keep going. But there are times when that doesn't happen. Like a few months ago, I did a video on this. I literally couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't swallow at all. I couldn't even swallow water. It took about 8 or 9 hours for it to go down. Anyway, my point is, and it becomes inflamed and it's very, very narrow through here. So this audio book is speaking to me and I'm listening and I'm moving my body and I start making this connection. I had this epiphany that I have a narrow esophagus for a couple of reasons, I believe. Maybe I was born with it. I don't know that. But I have some ideas and this is what came to me and I get to really move through this and heal this. And so one of the reasons why I'm sharing this with you is a couple of reasons. One of them is because we're never too old to learn. It's never too late to learn something new about yourself. And making this very specific connection has opened up a door for me to heal deeper my connection with food and my connection to my body and my connection to very specific trauma that I experienced and how I dealt with that with food. And so I grew up in a very violent, volatile environment. My parents were very angry, very violent with each other, very violent with myself and my brother. It was a very difficult time. I would hide under my bed. I'd be very tense. And what would happen is that my stomach would tense so hard. I would be so scared and I'd pull myself into a little ball. And what that does is it informs the esophagus to tighten, remain tight, because digestion and eating is off the cards. I'm in sympathetic, fight or flight, or freeze or fawn, and I am in it. I spent a lot of time doing that. And so when I would eat really quickly, and I would either go watch TV in a room, try and be with my grandparents so I wasn't near my parents, or I'd go hide. So there was a lot of tension in my family life, and this agitation would add to my upset. And so I want to read some things to you, and I want to share some things to you that I've learned through this process and really making this connection with food. And food used to be a savior for me as well. Now that wasn't a connection that I made. I've known that for years. But very specifically to this esophagus being tight. And what I've noticed in myself is that I'm at this low level, and so many of us are in the world today, at this low level stress response, but I'm so accustomed to it, it's become my norm. But it's not completely healthy. And we have to unpack this. And so when you unpack this, you give yourself permission to see the world differently and see yourself differently, and to choose to not behave from old behavioral patterns, old ways of being, coping strategies that once kept you safe. And so for me, the association that I've made is that, well, maybe I get to nurture this part of me in a different way and actually improve upon my physiological function by understanding that I was really just trying to protect myself. So I'm going to go into the importance of loving presence, empathetic resonance, and compassion, and meeting ourselves with that, because that has a direct correlation to the ventral vagal parasympathetic system. And that is responsible for putting us in parasympathetic to some degree and being in a more safe, relaxed place. So this warm, receptive connection between our hands and the Nurturance Canal, I'm going to explain to you why this is so important, because these are some healing techniques that we're about to get into, can soothe our bellies or open the door to implicit memory. Implicit memory is the unconscious memory that we have around, that's stored in our bodies around any and every experience, but particularly trauma, because trauma or intense experiences, they remain in our bodies in an implicit way, because we can't be conscious of everything and anything at the same time, or too many things. We just can't cope with that. So it's stored in our body in an implicit way and activates when there's a resemblance or an effect that's very similar to that experience to warn us of danger, and boom, we go into sympathetic. Everything changes. Our hearing changes, the way we see the world physically changes, the way we respond changes. There's just a lot changes. So we open this door to implicit memory to be able to deal with it, right? To be able to deal with this pain. And so hand on heart, hand on belly, hands on belly, letting yourself, that's symbolism, symbolic that you are safe, the warmth of your hand, right? And if it's not the warmth of your hand, maybe it's the warmth of someone else's hand. Maybe it's holding a teddy bear or a pillow or something, right? Maybe it's being witnessed in a particular way, like if you're a man, by a group of men, as you're sharing your story, and they're holding there for you and they're witnessing you and seeing you. So even if nothing happens, the offering of accompaniment, this offering of being with yourself, it begins to relieve the knot of tension, of traumatic tension that's probably been there for a long time, and this is at the core of embedded trauma. So before trauma becomes embedded, it becomes a possibility. And it becomes embedded once we move through a very painful experience that we react to, and it's stored in our bodies, again, to preempt defensive protective strategies later on. So the belly sensation, this is what really did it for me. The belly sensation that occurred at the time of the original experience becomes part of the stream of implicit memory. So for me, my stomach was in constant knots. I was constantly tense. This affected my esophagus. But I wanted to eat because food and eating was an escape as well. And it felt really good. Especially in contrast, because we learn so deeply through contrast with everything that was going on in my life. And so this connection that I've made, it feels liberating for me. But let me keep going into describing the Nurturance Canal. And so this whole system here is our Nurturance Canal. And again, the ventral vagal parasympathetic presence, this here, this loving presence, this loving empathetic presence, it provides enough neuroception, awareness, with the bellies and the nervous system, the ANS, the autonomic nervous system, and various parts of our brains and bodies, that the throat at the very top of the canal can open up and receive liquid nourishment. That means that we're safe. We can eat, we can drink water. We're not going to regurgitate. We're not necessarily going to be on a spectrum of bulimia or even anorexia. I mean, these are more complex subjects, but there is some truth here with respect to how we see ourselves, what we've experienced, how we've dealt with that, and if we have eating conditions or issues as adults, right? So the wisdom of the esophagus closes up when the belly system is in such a condition that digestion is impossible, and the belly system, the ENS, the enteric nervous system, responsible for so much of how we interpret the world and the environment, that feeds information through the vagus nerve into the brain. This is the part that keeps us safe. You've heard that saying before, that gut feeling, that this is where it comes from. And it's a very real thing. There are hundreds of millions of neurons in our guts. This is amazing. And 40 plus trillion bacteria that make the gut microbiome. There's so much activity going here that's feeding, giving information, taking information from the outside world and making it make somewhat sense internally. So working with adults, of course, because, it's important that, yes, we can do this with children as well, but I want to speak to the adults, and it may look a little different to working with children, right? But encouraging us through, again, gently placing a hand on the area of the greatest intensity, listening to our bodies, meeting ourselves with non-judgment, meeting ourselves with compassion. This is a healing practice in and of itself. Because the moment we are not in non-judgment, we're not activating the sympathetic nervous system to respond to something that's harsh, whether it's internal or external. Now we begin to relax, we create spaciousness in our bodies, in our minds, in our psychology, and we're able to breathe. In that spaciousness, we can get creative. Our frontal cortex comes back online, and we can think and feel through our issues. And this is really important. So we can sense our awakening, this awakening within, upon our enteric nervous system, with either a tightening in the belly, not a prolonged tightening in the belly where we're really scared, but this tightening in the belly that's just pulsating, and a wave of warm sensation and relaxation as these old memories begin to awaken within us, but begin to move through us in the presence of empathy and compassion. So in other words, working with a coach, working with a therapist, being seen and witnessed by a group of people that you trust, respect, and revere. There is so much research and science that shows us how powerful it is to be connected to other people. So our belly brains, our cardiac brains, and our skull brains, they form molecular memories of previous synaptic experiences, i.e., that trauma that you experience, whether it's being bullied, being in a volatile, violent family, being sexually abused, physically, emotionally abused, whatever it is, that it forms a molecular memory in your physiology. This encodes neural pathways. And then there is some probability of having that being reactivated by events that remind us of conditions of those memories originally formed. And so for me, I'm constantly eating fast. I have to be so active in my mind to not eat fast. I would eat fast because I enjoyed eating, and I was very overweight as a young kid as well because I couldn't stop eating because I wanted just to keep feeling good. So now I keep eating, but that speed of eating and the way that I eat, and I've had a very interesting relationship with food all my life, but it keeps triggering that I'm in a fight or flight response. That's why I'm eating fast, because I could get out of the situation, because I would eat, and then hide. It's very, very interesting for me. So, the way our ENS participates in the experience of implicit memory is by shutting off, implicit memory related to trauma, for example, past trauma, is by shutting off the parasympathetic and putting us into sympathetic fight or flight. And for me, yesterday I had tears in my eyes as I was feeling into this and thinking about, wow, all those times that I was self-loathing and I didn't like myself because I'd eat too much, or I'd eat so much that I'd vomit, or again, another connection is that I'd want my mum or dad to feel sorry for me. So if they felt sorry for me, the theory was that they wouldn't be as angry all the time with each other because they'd have to focus on my sickness or something. So many connections and many more, but I really just wanted to speak to digestive issues and the heart and the emotional being and that connection that I made. And I really believe, and Dr. Sano speaks to this. He's a leader he's passed away now, but he's a leader in psychosomatic therapy and work. Truly believes that you can make these adjustments. I mean, Dr. Bruce Lipton does as well through epigenetics, and he's not the only one, through epigenetic theorem. And so there's this possibility that I can really change what happens here by reorganizing my relationship to the past, but also to my past traumas. So exploring trauma needn't always be, sometimes it is, but needn't always be super heavy or painful. Sometimes it can be revelatory and revealing. Yes, there may be some tension or pain or big emotions that need to shift and move. But me making this connection within myself was just so empowering and it reinforces the deep work that I do with people and with myself around holding a safe space and having people that witness you. Yes, with skills, but with loving presence and empathy. This is so much of where the science is going. We have not evolved through isolation. We have evolved through nurturance. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you're feeling. Power and blessings to you.